Well, continuing with story time. So that story continues a little bit. The story about I am a queen of a time before time, because when I spoke to my mentor again and I read him what I wrote, he said, "You forget everything that I told you to write, everything that I said that you needed to say in a ceiling shattering prayer is said in what you wrote." Excuse me. And so he told me, he said, "You just keep repeating that everything is included right there." And it said to me that even though we seek so hard to do what is right, we have no idea how far off we are because of the level of deception that we have operated under for so long. And so we're sincere, and you can be sincerely wrong, right? We're sincere. If you have, I always use this analogy. You go to a BMW dealership, and the keys, if you get a particular BMW, the key will probably fit into all the locks of the cars on the lot. If it's a particular model, right? It probably will go in. But when you try to turn it, if you don't have the key for that car, it's not going to turn. Because I've thought for so long, like, wow, I've tried as hard as I could to do the things I think I'm supposed to do. But when I came into this knowledge, I'm like, so how come people live and die and they're so sincere and so dedicated to God and living these like righteous lives in our estimation? And I don't mean faking and being a hypocrite. I'm talking about people that really are sincere and doing the best that they know how, and they have like a close relationship with God. Like, how come how come they're not nobody was giving this information? And it just says to me that it's a protection. If we're walking around with the enemy's mind and we could unlock it like that, that means they would have access. They don't have access, because if they had access, they would have created something different by now. The whole universe, given their nature, the whole universe would have disappeared by now, because everything they put their hands to, it's it's about weaponizing it. It's about destroying. It's not about life and living, no matter how well-intentioned they seem. Like the Native Americans said, they speak with a forked tongue. And that's why it's so important for us, at a minimum, to pay attention to the things that we're seeing and that we're hearing outside of our physical senses that other people can corroborate. We have to trust ourselves. I think it was in one of these previous videos where I talked about, I think it was like 9/11. How many people narrowly escaped those towers falling on them or dying when those towers came down, because they paid attention to what they knew here that had no proof. We always hear this conversation. Oh, I believe in science. You hear that? I believe in science. It's a belief system. Science is knowledge, it's supposed to be based on fact, but they believe in science. Science is knowing how the creation works, the different pathways that allow the natural things that we see happening, how decoding how it happens and documenting it so you can share it with somebody else. That's science. But they're right, they believe in science because so many things, didn't they believe at some point that 90% of space was absolutely nothing? That's what they believe. There are many things that they believed, and there are many things that they've lied about and act like this is a scientific fact. Like black people were inferior, scientific fact. When in fact they're the ones who are inferior and unnatural to the planet, seeking to maintain their own survival on the planet, where the majority of people have color. And so if they mix with us, they naturally will be eliminated. They will be anyway, because they're not natural. So nature won't be denied. So they will try many different ways to keep themselves alive, but nature will not be denied. Yeah, so that I am a queen of a time before time. It took me a long time to even begin to understand what it was saying. In the beginning, where it says, I am a queen of a time before time, ruler of the sublime, I come with my whole mind. I understood that. I understood the sublime was like my subconscious mind, because I said I come with my whole mind, which is how we operated. The whites and their offspring, they see things in these very discrete compartments, and they have to plan and detail every little single thing, where we see the entire picture and we can just look and know, because we're part of the created order. So we don't have to go through, when they go through 1,000 steps to get to something and to prove through their quote unquote science that this is what it is, we already know, and we have an understanding, and we have the ability to communicate with the forces in nature that create what they call science. Create and maintain the natural order, because their decoding of the natural order is what we call science. It has nothing to do with belief. It just is. They've made us believe in magic. They've made us believe in magic, and they've made us believe that God and science are two separate things. But if you have the creator and the creatrix producing all these things that we see, then you come and you decode the things that you see, and you say, oh, this atom mixed with these two atoms, you put them together and you get water. Or you put them a little in a little different formation, you'll get steam. They change the formation a little bit, you get ice, right? You decode that, but who created that? That's already there. So everything that they come with is to divide and to conquer, to pit us against our own selves and against each other. So acknowledging the things that we see, the things that we know, especially when it defies what they consider to be reality. Because I'm sure you have very concrete examples of when you saw something and the thing you saw happened again, right? Or you just knew something, or you sensed something. I know when there has been an interference of these wayward spirits. I know that in my dreams, I have felt the heaviness, a heavy weight that has been feeling imbalanced. And I can even remember, I can even remember one time this was in the daytime, I was taking a nap, and wherever I was in a house somewhere, King was in another room, and I don't think I saw anyone come in, but I just started to feel this heaviness come over me, and I knew another presence was in the room, and I couldn't even. I was losing my ability to speak because I went to pray, but I was losing my ability to actually speak in that place. And I I called, it's like I called out to King, but more in my mind, even in that place. And he came in and he was like pouring oil on top of my head, like anointing my head. And and as he was anointing my head, I was coming back. And literally, I woke up and he was, I don't remember if he was coming into the room or he was, no, he had come into the room and he was standing like right behind me, almost over me. And so I was able to tell him what had just happened and how I tried to call him. And so there are times when we're having communication, we're having communication with other people, but because we don't even talk about it or we don't share it, there's no confirmation. I could have, if I was completely clueless, I'd have been like, oh wow, what a coincidence. It wasn't a coincidence. He heard me at a different level and he came in there. And I think I don't know if he had just come to check on me. He didn't come in there for anything particular, specific. But when I told him what I told him, then um, everything made sense to him and to me. And so this coming into knowledge of ourselves and putting literally reconstituting ourselves. We have the right to do that, to reconstitute ourselves. We're asking people for reparations. We're asking our open enemy because we don't know who we are. We don't really see who they are. And even though we have seen the devastation in our community and across the world, there is still this belief in the goodness of them, in the goodness of them. Their heart will change if we're loving enough. If your enemy is your enemy. And these, you hear me say open enemy, because they don't try to hide it. Y'all go to work every day and you feel that pressure, that thing that we call racism is coming from the spirit realm. It's coming from the spirit realm. They told us, oh, we're all God's people. And that's why we think, oh, they can change. But you can't duplicate an original. You can't make an exact duplicate of an original. There is something that's different. And the thing that is different is that spiritual organ, our own soul, that connects us through ancestry, through our blood circles, right back to the creator and creatress, right back to the supreme being. There is a difference between us and them. There is a difference. You can only, if you drug someone, then you understand that if you've kidnapped them and then and you drug them and they're heavily drugged, well, whatever you tell them, they probably will believe or they will do it because they're not in their right mind. If you take information away from people about who they are and about the things that you have done, they're not in their right mind. I'm thinking about a police officer in Baltimore that it's 2024. I think it probably was 2022 when she was killed. And the two guys that murdered her, they also went somewhere else, or at least one of them went somewhere else, and they murdered another guy a few hours later. Okay. So the the police, it was a young policewoman. I don't even think she had been on the force for that long. And so she was murdered. Then the guy, one of those two guys, went to some guy that owed him $100 from literally, I don't know, 15 or 20 years prior. This was a friend or somebody that he knew very well and the family knew. Okay. He went and he killed him. When they asked him, why'd you kill him? Oh, he owed me $100. He bought that car from me and he never paid me the $100. But then after that, he killed that guy. But after that, he went to the man's house and he sat there talking with his fiance and and playing with his little baby. He murdered the man and then he went to his house, sat there. The lady opened the door for him. I don't even remember if the mother was there. His mom was there. I don't think she was there at the time. But he went and he played with the little baby of the man he murdered. This is blindness. Meaning that, and I don't remember, there's something about the mother too. So I don't know if he went to the mother afterwards or what, but there is something in us that is so disconnected from who we are that when something as shocking as that happened, the lady, the fiance, she should have felt something, even if she didn't feel that her soon-to-be husband was dead. That man who murdered him was sitting right in front of her, and she didn't detect anything. It would be all in his energy field, even if he's pretending and all of that. Something should have resonated as something terrible has happened. But it's literally how far, and that's not to blame her for anything. That's literally the condition that we're in. When that white boy went into the church in South Carolina and killed those 9 people, he sat there for an hour. They're praying to Jesus and they're worshiping God. And I'm sure they all felt something when he came in, because white people don't come in there like that. And certainly not somebody young like him. So it had to be odd. But they suppressed everything about the oddness of him being in their presence to their detriment. We're not supposed to walk with this blindness. So this is more than just us embracing our intuition. It begins right there because we distrust ourselves. There's something that we sense or something that we know and we can't prove it. And so, we don't say something. But then whatever that is that we knew or that we should have done or actions we should have taken, experience bears out that we were right about it. I can remember one story. I can remember when I think it was my son's birthday, and my son and my daughter, they went over their grandmother's house in the country. And they had a little cousin. She was very small at the time. Maybe she was, what was she? I think I'm trying to think of my daughter might have been 8, then she might have been 4 or 5, somewhere around there. And my sister came to pick up my daughter to take her for the weekend because she didn't live too far from where the grandmother lived. And this little girl, she was so upset. She did not want my daughter to leave. It was like extra. And my daughter was like, it's okay, I'm gonna come back. I'm just going by my auntie for a little bit, but I'm gonna come back, like in 2 days or something. She didn't want her to leave. And it was at night. and they lived in the country, dark country roads. So the grandmother said, well, you know what? She's so upset. Let's just pray. Let's just hold hands and pray and before you leave. So they did that. And then my daughter and my sister left. A little while later, my son and his cousin and other aunt over there went out for, I think it was my son or his cousin's birthday. It must have been the cousin's birthday. They drove past a really bad accident where they saw a car had flipped over. And they're like, oh my God, I hope those people are all right. And I think there were emergency vehicles and things there at that point. And they went on their way, but they were looking and there was emergency vehicles, but they were just like, oh my God, I hope no one died. Around the same time, the grandmother is at home and she's washing dishes. After my sister and my daughter leave, she's washing dishes. And all of a sudden, she just grabs her stomach and she's like, oh my God. And she just starts to pray. She just begins to pray and pray and pray. And I want to say maybe an hour later or so, she gets a call. And the call is that her daughter was in a head-on collision and she was taken to a hospital. So now she goes to the hospital to see her daughter, and then she realizes the person that she was in a head-on collision with was my sister, my daughter, and my sister's husband. Do you see why the little girl was acting like that? Why the grandmother, she felt it like in her belly, like something happened. She didn't know what happened. Now, my sister and my kid's aunt, they knew about each other, but it had been years. So I don't even remember if they ever actually, I think they had met before, but this was a dark night, dark road, no lights or anything, and a ditch on either side. My brother-in-law was driving. Now, it's a lonely country road. So you can see cars from a distance because you will see the headlights. They're coming from quite a distance, coming in the opposite direction. And he says to my sister, he's like, that car is in my lane. That car is in my lane. And he's like, are they gonna move? And it's like they're not moving. And so at the last second, he changes lanes to avoid crashing. And when he does that, there is a head when they come to the point where they should pass each other, they literally have a head-on collision. And that car tumbles down into a ditch. On the aunt's side, on the grandmother's daughter coming, she's a nurse, she's coming home from work. She saw the same thing that they saw. She's coming and she's like, this car is in my lane. Why are they in my lane? Maybe they're gonna move. And she says, but they don't. I don't know if she swerved, but she's like, they don't move. She thinks they're gonna move. I don't know how she moved, but she saw exactly what they saw. And there was a head-on collision. Now, when they finally came out, my sister and her husband and my daughter were sitting on the side. So when my daughter's other aunt came out the car, she's talking to them, and then they're calling, I think they're calling 911, And she said, she sees my daughter. She's like, that's my niece. And my sister's like, no, this is my niece. Like they didn't literally didn't understand what was going on. It's like, no, this is my niece. And then my daughter, she realizes Auntie Jody. And so what is the likelihood? That was probably the first time my sister had even been to the grandmother's house in the country. What is the likelihood of them having a head-on collision like that? At that time, I was in Ritual Healing Village with Sobonfu Some, and I remember it, when we gathered telling that story about how they had this head-on collision. Both cars were totaled, and they had some pain and everything, but there were no broken bones, and they were alive. And she said that was because your daughter was in the car. Because if she wasn't in the car, they would have all been dead. Now that's I say spirit knowledge. That's knowledge that comes from growing up within the within our culture, because you understand that there's certain things that happen. And I remember her just saying, even though people talk about their time to die or dying before their time, within their traditions, they understand that you have like three times. There are three potential times that you can actually leave, but something can stop you from leaving. Like something can happen that prevents that. And that was one of those times. And she said, she said take an egg or something and put it at the intersection, or put it at the place where they crashed. And I said, well, this place is so far from where I live, I can't even get there, and I can't even tell you exactly where it happened because I wasn't there. And she said, it's fine. She said, you can take it to an intersection and put it there. And I don't remember, say a prayer or something, but what she was saying was that it would help to contain the energy. So, we have such a detailed understanding of the world and how it works, not just this physical surface understanding. Because if I throw a rock in the water, it ripples out. When I read this baby girl's book, and I realized, like, now she's probably 21. But when I read her book, she wrote this book. I think back there I said, oh, I thought she was 5. She was 9. She wrote this book at 9, and I read it. So from way back then, I still have this book. And I think when I had that folder where my grandmother and I were, there was a picture of my college graduation there. I think this is the same time I saw this book, and then I picked it up and I brought it with me. So there's so many things that are happening in our life that we're not aware of, and we're just looking at this physical reality, which is like literally the very last step down. If we have to say we're stepping down in consciousness, or in those different levels of awareness that we have, where we can be given a window into something that is going to happen in the future, whether it's the close future or down the road some years. We call it premonition, right? There's that window. And so we're seeing and experiencing at different levels of reality. So in those dream states, when we have interference with those wayward spirits and we're fighting there, what happens is that those things are being whatever's happening there is being like seeds planted in our minds, and then we walk it out to some extent in our waking life without usually being aware of what it is that is happening. So the more aware we become, the more we can recognize certain things and stop it before it happens. But the place of the greatest level of protection is operating in our natural manner, which is embracing who we are at our core, our powerful selves, because God didn't create any victims. And so we experience victimization, we experience, the lack, the disconnection, but this is not who we were created to be. So we're building ourselves, we should be building ourselves back up, but we ought to be moving in the right direction. And when we hear something that does not, I hear the word comport, I don't even use the word, but this is how we hear. When we receive information that literally does not jive with the things that we know to be true, the things that we have believed in, we have a responsibility to research that, to literally check it out, because we came here to carry out a certain job, a certain task. It was an agreement. I don't want to say agreement. Mother, Father, God gave us a certain task to carry out while we're here. And we have a responsibility to do that. And that means we have a responsibility to find out who we are, because our lives are not just our own. Somebody sacrificed in order for us to be here. 3, 4 generations, 5, 6 generations gave their entire life for us to just be here. And we're creating space for those who come back after us. We're creating space for us even when we come back. And so they've taken lifetimes away from us in the past, but they take our future lifetimes when we don't embrace who we are and we believe the lies of, oh, reincarnation isn't real, that's devil worship, or that's not true. You die and you go to heaven. No, you have a responsibility to know the truth and to not just take wholesale what your open enemy says. You don't want to believe it's your open enemy until something happens to you personally. It's just like the young lady whose fiance was murdered, and the murderer came and sat there and played with their baby. Do you know how devastated they were when they realized, like, how sick, how twisted can someone be? That's one thing. But then how come we can look at that same sick, twisted person when we realize what actually went on and be like, how come we didn't even feel or detect anything? Something is wrong. It's time for us. It's time for us to wake up and to reclaim our identity. Our identity has nothing to do with belief. Your religion and the things you believe in has to do with belief. Who your mother and who your father is and where they come from has nothing to do with your belief. It has to do with reality. It's time for us as Afro-Wakani and Afro-Right Kaitni to deal with reality.